All right, we're back again here, continuing on now with the seminar on Learning Guide 7. This is part 2 now, and in this one we are looking at a scenario where we're looking at a cost of a conference where you are making t-shirts and selling them at the conference, and you're running a little business here, so you want to find out a few things, a few functions. So let's look at the example 4 here. Okay, so example 4, we have to determine the combined functions for the graph. So the first question right here, it wants us to find the total cost. Well, if you look at this question, we know the cost for you is going to be $125. That's probably the setup for your printing and the machines that are working with all the ink on your t-shirt. And then you have another cost of $7.50 per t-shirt, because you have to buy the blank t-shirts to print your logo onto it for the conference. So first thing is, we know that the cost, just looking down here, I'll circle this right here, the cost will be that. All right. So now let's look at the revenue. Revenue is how much money you're making. Well, if you sell them for $12 each, that's your revenue. So if you look down here, the revenue is that. So now in part B, it asks you to graph these two. So you can see down here on B, I put a graph. Notice I labeled, very important to label. And then I marked where the point that they intersect right there. And that point of intersection is important because that's when your business is the break-even point. All right, so where the two lines cross. And now the last one, C here, we want to find the profit. Well, we know profit equals your revenue subtract your cost. All right, because we need to have the revenue and then subtract what cost to do all the printing at machines and that. So here is what we have down here. We have this little formula, and now it just goes back to what we've been doing, but there's the revenue. All right, and here is the cost. Combine the like terms and we have the answer. So now I'd like you to pause, and then I want you to try on your own and get the answer to this question. Okay, and hopefully you did well on that one. Okay. Now we're going to look at the product and quotient of different functions. So we've looked at adding and subtracting. Now we're looking at product, which is times, and quotient, which is division. Okay, our first example here, we have an f function, and then we have a g function, and they want us to multiply. So what I did is I wrote them out side by side, or bracket to bracket. Then what I did from here to here is I FOILed out, or expanded. And remember this 2, I had to have 2 brackets. So that's how I got that. And then I just collected like terms and got to the answer. And then I knew that because it's to a cube there, an x cubed, I knew that its domain is XER and range is YER. Because we did the cubics earlier on, there are functions that do that. Now, example 2, we're going to look at a quotient now. A quotient is division, so we take the f function and we divide it by the g function. Now, you got to remember there's going to be restrictions here, right? So I always do the restrictions first. So what you do is you take the bottom out, okay, this is the denominator, and you make it equal 0, and then basically just solve. So there is our restriction. So that's good to know right off the bat. Now when I simplify, I got to look to see if it can factor. So your brain is saying, can it factor? Well, the top can factor. 2x plus 2, x minus 2, because difference of squares. And the bottom can factor, because 2 is common, x minus 2. And now I look for a cross out, and there we go. So I've simplified it down to x plus 2 all over 2. So there's my new function. All right. Now, the quotient one on the bottom here, I'm just going to swing up and do it up here. This is when you have a fraction in a fraction, so we call this complex fractions. So it's complex. So I have 1 over x minus 2 divided by 1 over x squared minus 4. So now we got to look for restrictions. Well, I have a restriction here that x minus 2 equals 0. So x cannot be 2, so that's the top one. And the bottom one, I have x squared minus 4 equals 0. X squared equals 4 square root. X cannot equal plus and minus 2. Okay, once I figured out the restriction, I'm going to show you an easier way to do complex fractions in this case. So I'm going to rewrite it as 1 over x minus 2 divide by 1 over x squared minus 4. And then I'm going to kiss and flip. So change that to a time sign, flip it, and then I know it's going to be x squared minus 4 over x minus 2, and then I can factor the top to x plus 2, x minus 2, all over x minus 2, cross, cross. So all that work there is to get a simplified answer of x plus 2. Okay, and the domain and range are going to be XER, except x cannot equal those restrictions, 2 and negative 2, and the range is YER, y cannot equal, in this case, 0. because it's an asymptote. But don't worry too much about this stuff right here. We'll look at this in more depth later. Okay. So these two questions, or this one question, you can try it, get an answer. Remember to pause and see how you did, and then we'll see. Domain for this guy is XER and the range is YER. And again, domain and range here, it'll be in a later learning guide, we'll go into more depth. So just stop there.